In the wake of Charlie Kirk's murder, this image has been widely circulated as quotes attributed to him, and in this video we're going to verify the truth and accuracy of each one of these quotes. I think truth and accuracy are extremely important. The internet is full of misinformation these days. I care a lot about that, and I think you should too. Doesn't matter if you're on the left or the right, up or down. I think if you're going to make certain claims, like these, you should be absolutely sure whether they are accurate or not. I want to be as truthful as possible, so I tried, to the best of my ability, to track down each quote to its original primary source. Not articles that claim that he said it, or clips from videos that could have been edited to take things out of context. I tried to track down the original videos posted on Charlie Kirk's official channels, or tweets from his verified account. All of the links to the sources will be in the description with timestamps. So here's how this will work. I'll present the quote as it is stated in the image, then I'll show you the original source with as much context as possible. Finally, I'll give some thoughts of my own, but the main goal of this is that you can make up your own mind. The first quote is actually a bonus quote. It's not in the image, but it has been widely circulated, and the quote is that he can't stand the word empathy. Let's listen to what he said.
The new communication strategy is not to do what Bill Clinton used to do, where he would say, I feel your pain. Instead, it is to say, you're actually not in pain. So let's just, very short clip. Bill Clinton in the 1990s, it was all about empathy and sympathy. I can't stand the word empathy, actually. I think empathy is a made-up New Age term that does a lot of damage, but it is very effective when it comes to politics. Sympathy I prefer more than empathy. That's a separate topic for a different time. Here's cut 65.
Did you catch that?
Sympathy I prefer more than empathy.
Let's hear it again.
Sympathy I prefer more than empathy.
So this quote has been widely used to claim that he's some kind of evil monster that doesn't feel compassion for people, when in reality what he said is that he doesn't subscribe to one specific type of compassion, he subscribes to a slightly different one instead. The next quote is that gay people should be stoned to death.
Let's let her say it. 120, I'll respond, and then I got a dash.
I've shared prayers on here before and said, God bless. And that's because my faith is really important to me. And it's also one reason why I love every neighbor. In Matthew 22, a religious teacher asked Jesus, what's the most important commandment? And Jesus says to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. There's no greater commandments than these. I believe it's mentioned 8 times, love your neighbor. So yes, everyone belongs, everyone's welcome, everyone is treated with empathy and respect. It doesn't say love every neighbor except. There are so many reasons I stand strong in love. I stand with everyone. That's who I am. And the love back and the God bless if you disagree is genuine.
It doesn't just say love your neighbor, though. It does say love your neighbor except, in a sense.
As yourself, but hold on. She's not totally wrong when she says, first of all, the first part is Deuteronomy 6:3-5. The second part is Leviticus 19. So you love God. So you must love his law. How do you love somebody?
Here we go, folks.
You love them by telling them the truth, not by confirming or affirming their sin. And it says, by the way, Miss Rachel, you might want to crack open that Bible of yours. In a lesser referenced part of the same part of Scripture is in Leviticus 18, is that thou shalt lay with another man shall be stoned to death. Just saying. So, Miss Rachel, you quote Leviticus 19, love your neighbor as yourself. The chapter before affirms God's perfect law when it comes to sexual matters.
So, as you can see from this clip, he didn't actually advocate for that. He was simply quoting the Bible in response to another person quoting the Bible. But let's listen a little further to see what he thinks.
Now, so how do you best love somebody? You love them by telling the truth. You don't have to be cruel. You don't have to be un-Christ-like in your communication.
Yeah, you don't have to be mean.
However,
you
certainly, and I would love for Miss Rachel to respond to this, is pride a Christian value? She thinks it is. Happy Pride Month, everybody. Is being proud something that we should... No, it's in fact, the scriptures tell us the opposite. Pride goeth before the fall. That pride is something we need to try to reduce in our life, to increase humility and increase piety
there is one
and
list that
obedience. Say that?
I said there is one list that Pride's on.
So as far as I can tell, I believe the point of the segment that they were doing was to criticize and bring attention to the hypocrisy, I guess you could say, of a person celebrating Pride Month while quoting the Bible, because, as they say, the Bible very strongly argues that pride is actually a bad thing, and in fact, pride is one of the 7 deadly sins. And if you're still unsure how Charlie Kirk feels about gay people, let's take a look at another clip.
Hey, Mr. Kirk, thanks for coming out tonight. I got a question for you real quick. Up until about 5 years ago when gay marriage was legalized nationwide, the conservative movement has been explicitly pro-traditional family. Now, both you and your organization advocate for the acceptance of anti-Christian, immoral lifestyles like homosexuality and transsexuality, going as far to invite drag queens like Lady MAGA to your events. It seems to me and anyone who's paying attention that conservatives just believe whatever liberals believed 5 years ago. Right now, there's a push by the left to normalize pedophilia by way of child drag queen shows and... Oh, excuse me. Phone shut off.
Go back to your notes. That's probably where you saved it. You know, you gotta like push double tap and then go over.
Right now, there is a push by the left to normalize pedophilia by way of child drag queen shows and rebranding pedophiles as minor attracted persons. 5 years from now, will you be promoting child drag queen shows? Will child abuse become part of the conservative platform?
Boy, that's a slippery slope fallacy if I've ever seen one. First of all, I've never invited a drag queen to come to any Turning Point USA event. I was at Politicon, and an individual by the name of Lady MAGA came up, and I took a picture, and she walked away. Secondly, let me ask you a question. Are you a Trump supporter?
Yes, sir.
So are you a proud Trump supporter?
Of course.
So are you sickened that he had a gay man speak at his convention?
Yes.
Then you're not a Trump supporter, my friend. Thank you very much.
If somebody is advocating for being openly homosexual, yeah, they should not be part of the conservative movement.
So I just want to go through the list. Guy Benson, no place in the conservative movement. Dave Rubin, no place in the conservative movement. Peter Thiel, no place in the conservative movement. So that just to go down the list.
If they are supporting open homosexuality.
So
yeah, no.
I'm going to ask a very respectful question, as respectfully as I can. What does what they do in their private life concern you so much that you have to go up in front of a crowd? And
it is against God. That is
so
why.
Let me ask
Are
you
a
question.
Christian or not?
Do we live in a theocracy? Yes or no? No. Do we live in a theocracy?
You said you're a Christian.
I am a Christian. And do you know what? And guess what? I will say this. Part of being a Christian is appropriately interpreting what the theological says for the individual, but also means to be long-suffering and patient and loving and kind. Jesus Christ talked to all people. Jesus Christ went and did his ministry through Judea and Samaria, and he had dinner with tax collectors, and he had dinner with prostitutes, and he did his ministry in every part of the Mediterranean. What it means to be a Christian, my friend, is to be open-minded but firm in your beliefs, so you can have that belief. But if you say there's something inherently wrong with communicating or associating just because they make different personal decisions than you, sir, are not a conservative. Thanks for being here tonight.
The next quote is, people are scared when they see a black pilot flying a plane.
No, I mean, like, you want to go thought crime? Like, I'm sorry, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified.
So this is the quote as it is usually presented, but let's keep listening a little further to try and understand what the reasoning is.
Well, that's the
you
game
wouldn't have
theory
done
I was
that.
talking
You
about.
wouldn't have done that before.
That's not an immediate.
No, you wouldn't
that's
have done
not
that
who I
before.
am. That's
No.
not what I believe.
It is the reality the left has
but
created.
I want to be as blunt as possible because now I'm connecting two dots. Wait a second. The CEO just said that he's forcing that a white qualified guy is not going to get the job.
So fair.
It creates like unhealthy thinking patterns. I don't want to think that way.
No.
Yeah.
And no one should, right? I mean,
So as you can see from this, he himself believes that this thought is not a correct way to think, and that he shouldn't be thinking like this. And in order to understand where this thought even comes from, we need to go back and listen to the conversation that was happening beforehand.
let's play cut 93, please.
Yeah, that's it.
Military. How is diversity and diversity targets working into the Aviation Academy?
We have committed that 50% of the class of the classes will be women or people of color. Today, only 19% of our pilots at United Airlines are women or people of color. And by the way, from all the data I've seen, that's the highest of any airline in the country.
white males don't just dominate in the cockpits, also in the C-suite at United Airlines.
Well, look, at United, I'm proud of the diversity that we actually have in our C-suite. I think if you look around corporate America, one of the things we do is for every job when we do an interview, we require women and people of color to be involved in the interview process.
Going from 19% to 50-50 in 1 year. That he said our class in 2023 in 1 year is actually impossible. And I think, Blake, you made this point. Are there even enough women or minority potential pilots out there that want to be a pilot?
Where are they going to find these people?
It's the funny thing, because
where's the supply going to come from?
There's a diversity push in literally every industry in America. So they're like, okay, we need to have more, women and people of color physicists and pilots and finance gurus and film directors.
Don't forget surgeons.
But we can't also it's okay that they're more common than the population in professional sports or hip hop or any of these industries, and we don't want that to go away. And you need only a very basic brain here to do the math in your head and say this doesn't work out.
I hope I'm wrong. It's just someone's going to die, because we could joke about this all we want. Well, you cannot have. It's very, very sophisticated. You hire people for sophisticated, high stakes, immediate call jobs with 50 checklist items, and you do not have competency as the core reason. Somebody's going to die. You want to go thought crime? Like, I'm sorry, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified.
Well, that's the
you wouldn't have done that. You wouldn't have done that before.
That's not an immediate.
No, you wouldn't have done that before.
That's not who I am. That's not what I believe.
It is the reality the left has created.
I want to be as blunt as possible, because now I'm connecting two dots. Wait a second. The CEO just said that he's forcing that a white qualified guy is not going to get the job. So I see this guy. He might be a nice person. I say, boy, I hope he's not a Harvard-style affirmative action student that has points for, and he landed half of his flight simulator, trials.
That's the thing.
Such a good point.
And by the way, it creates like unhealthy thinking patterns. I don't want to think that way. No. Yeah. And no one should, right? I mean, I
would say they explained themselves pretty well. The broader point is that when you start trying to hire based on characteristics that are not the person's ability to do the job, by definition, you are saying that the person's ability doesn't have as much priority as it did before, because now you're introducing other secondary factors that you're selecting for. So merit or skill or the person's ability to do the job should be the only thing that you're looking for, especially when it comes to safety-critical jobs like flying a plane. The next quote is Taylor Swift should submit to her husband.
Now look, it is no mystery that I'm not the world's biggest Taylor Swift fan. However, I think there's actually something here that we should all celebrate. How often do we on this program talk about the 3 M's make you a better citizen and more conservative, which of course is mortgage, marriage, and mating. And so Taylor Swift obviously has plenty of mortgages. She's got more homes than I'll ever have. She's incredibly wealthy. But maybe one of the reasons why Taylor Swift has been so just kind of annoyingly liberal over the last couple of years is that she's not yet married and she doesn't have children. I say this non-sarcastically. I say this as a husband and a father. Having children changes you. Getting married changes you. And I hope that America's biggest pop star marrying the pharmaceutical spokesperson ends up conservatizing them. This is something that I hope will make Taylor Swift more conservative. Engage in reality more and get outside of the abstract clouds. Reject feminism. Submit to your husband, Taylor. You're not in charge. And most importantly, I can't wait to go to a Taylor Kelsey concert. I can't say it without laughing. You got to change your name. If not, you don't really mean it. Congratulations, Taylor.
So he did say that quote. I would point out, the Bible does have several passages where it states that wives should submit to their husbands. And even though I'm not religious, in my opinion, in the context of the Bible, submit implies order, structure, hierarchy, not necessarily blind obedience or coercion, but make of it what you will. The next quote is that no one should be allowed to retire.
I'm going to say something very provocative. I'm not a fan of retirement. I don't think retirement is biblical. I think that if you retire, you should always be doing something. Not to say that you can't slow down, but you should be helping people, part-time work, you should be helping with the grandkids, volunteering. I do not like the overemphasis on a retirement-based society. I don't. I think there is so much talent that is not being used. In fact, I talk to senior citizens. They say, Charlie, after I officially retired, I went back and I was a part-time substitute teacher, counselor at the local church. And so I challenge this idea of retirement altogether. People are living longer. Are they doing more with their 70s or 80s? Some yes, some not so much. But you say, Charlie, I'm just going to retire and I'm just going to go golf. I think what a waste of the gifts that God has given you. What a waste of the wisdom that you have been given just to kind of just watch TV and to golf. No, there are young people that need you as a mentor.
Yeah, so he didn't say that at all. He said that when people retire from their job, they should still keep active because not only is it better for them, it's also a benefit to their communities. Next quote is that leftists should not be allowed to move to red states. Unfortunately, I could not find any sources for this. British colonialism made the world decent.
We have Bruce Gilley, who's a professor of political science, joining us. All about British colonialism, a very provocative topic that will assuredly make the media lose their mind about how British colonialism actually made the world decent. Separation of powers, habeas corpus, freedom of speech, individual property rights, the respect and the dignity of the individual. Where did all those come from? The Magna Carta, the great thinkers of Edmund Burke to Shakespeare. Why is it that the world actually became more civil? Well, certain cultures are better than others. Saying that out loud is a thought crime. British colonialism was the most benign global empire ever, and it's kind of sparked this conversation after the tragic and incredibly unfortunate death of Queen Elizabeth.
Yep, this quote is confirmed. Although I would say he does bring up some good points about elements of the English legal system and values and literature as well, that honestly only got spread to as much of the world as they have because of colonialism. Now, obviously, colonialism is widely seen as a horrible thing, and it's overwhelmingly bad, yes, but just like with every single thing in the entire planet, it doesn't only have bad things. Some good things actually did come of it, and I think it's fine to talk about those. Next quote, the guy who assaulted the Pelosis should be bailed out.
I mean, I'm looking at Politico.com, I'm looking at the New York Times, I'm looking at all these places, and there's a little bit of mention here. For example, Politico says top Republicans reject any link between GOP rhetoric and Paul Pelosi assault. Of course you should reject any link. Why is the Republican Party, why is the conservative movement to blame for gay schizophrenic nudists that are hemp jewelry makers breaking into somebody's home, or maybe not breaking into somebody's home? Why are we to blame for that exactly? And why is he still in jail? Why has he not been bailed out? By the way, if some amazing patriot out there in San Francisco or the Bay Area wants to really be a midterm hero, someone should go and bail this guy out. I bet his bail's like $30,000 or $40,000. Bail him out and then go ask him some questions. I wonder what his bail is. They're going after him with attempted murder, political assassination, all this sort of stuff. I'm not qualifying it. I think it's awful. It's not right.
Yeah, he said it. He added that it was to ask him questions, but I don't have anything more to add. You heard what he said. The next quote is, religious freedom should be terminated. Once again, I couldn't find any sources for this. However, here's a video of Charlie talking broadly about religion, freedom, and religious freedom.
Freedom is not sustainable if you remove religion. And I'll be even more specific.
freedom is not sustainable if you remove Christianity. Eventually it will implode.
When I was in school as a kid, I didn't really learn much about that at all. In fact, I wasn't religious. And so for me, I didn't even really care about the subject. But to our founders, it was absolutely essential. Why is religious freedom the mother of all freedoms?
First and foremost, it's the freedom to worship your own creator, the reason why you exist. And also the founding fathers designed this system of self-government, believing that only with a moral and religious people this was possible. It's John Adams' quote where he said, "The Constitution was written solely for a moral and religious people. It's wholly inadequate for the people of any other." And so limited government is only possible when people are able to regulate their own decisions and conduct, particularly in religious communities, or having at least the church or the worship of God as a centerpiece of your life. So this idea of liberty, the way that the founding fathers understood liberty, is not the traditional libertarian view of liberty that we've come to realize in America. It's the ability to pursue virtue without somebody getting in the way.
I think it's safe to say that he actually believes that religious freedom is extremely important, so that's the opposite of what the quote says. Next quote is that multiple black politicians stole white people's spots.
So now what really gets people fired up is the monologue that I did yesterday, the rant about the self-admitted, let's just say, story that Ketanji Brown Jackson and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee have mentioned about affirmative action. And they said they only got to college because of affirmative action. Now, affirmative action by definition is the lowering of standards to prioritize skin color and melanin content over the pursuit of excellence. It is the decline of meritocracy, and you are de-emphasizing people of one race to promote people of other races. So this is the clip in question. It is going totally viral, and I have nothing to apologize before. I stand by it 100%, but people are losing their minds. In fact, the one article, Mediaite.com, they call it unalloyed racism. I mean, it's not even a term that people, could you imagine? You're an unalloyed racist. Okay. You are strong as long as you don't care that they call you a racist. They are weak if you do not care what names they call you. Here's the clip in question, play cut 112. In fact, if we would have said 3 weeks ago, Blake, if we would have said that Joy Reid and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks, we would have been called the racist. But now they're coming out and they're saying it for us. They're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously. Now people are calling that racist, but hold on a second. Ketanji Brown Jackson's a moron. She's not a smart person. She shouldn't be taken seriously. Evidence? Play cut 114.
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition? No.
Yeah.
I can't.
You can't?
Not in this context.
So
I'm not a biologist.
The meaning of the word.
Yeah, that's a Supreme Court justice who's there because of affirmative action, proving to the world she's a moron. Can't tell you what a woman is in a Senate hearing. So logically, this means more qualified students academically gave up their spot. And by the way, in full transparency, I don't know if I had the brain processing power to go take a physics course at Harvard. I think Blake did. He went to Dartmouth. Other people do. Great. But you have to be honest about the pursuit of excellence. I have certain talents. One of the talents is not being able to get into an Ivy League school. Okay. Now they get really offended by it, even though they have admitted the following. Joy Reid, I got into Harvard only because of affirmative action. Sheila Jackson Lee, I rise today as a clear recipient of affirmative action. Michelle Obama, I wasn't supposed to go to Princeton because my high school counselor said my test scores were too low. Michelle Obama told you she was not smart enough to be able to get into Princeton. That was a direct quote from Michelle Obama. Additionally, you read Michelle Obama's thesis, it's full of typos. It's not exactly the Summa Theologica. It's not exactly a brilliant piece of philosophical accomplishment. Okay, they might be sweet people, they might be nice people. They're acknowledging that affirmative action elevated them when they did not have the objective standards without their race to be prioritized. You're not allowed to say that.
He did say it. What he also said is that several black politicians, by their own admission, stated that they wouldn't have gotten the positions that they have if not for affirmative action. And affirmative action, at least in the United States, as far as I'm aware, is kind of by definition the prioritizing of certain spots towards minorities, even if they have lower qualifications. The next one is a combination of two separate quotes. One is about Martin Luther King Jr. being an awful person, and the Civil Rights Act being a mistake. I could not find the very first instances of him saying it, but what I did find was this article talking about it, and then his own response to the article.
He says, "Hi, I'm a reporter with Wired magazine in New York. I'm reaching out because we're publishing a story about Charlie Kirk's comments on Martin Luther King Jr. and his plan to release content about King on January 15th. Mind you, they act like I'm planning a terrorist attack. Like the way this is written, his plans to create content on January 15th. Like what? I mean, like what am I, like planning like a terrorist attack on Christmas Day? We note in our piece, oh, so you already wrote the piece. That's what I love about this, right? They're not asking me for comment. They're trying to fill in a couple gaps. We note in our piece, oh, so you already wrote the piece. We note in our piece that Kirk describes King as, quote, a bad guy. It's true. And Kirk self-described very, very radical view that the country made a mistake when it passed the Civil Rights Act. Also true. As we note in the piece, Kirk has previously described Kirk as a hero and a civil rights icon. It's true. I used to be wrong. What inspired Kirk to shift his view on MLK? Why does Kirk think that MLK is a bad guy? When Kirk says that MLK says, quote, one good thing he didn't believe, what does he mean by that? Why does Kirk believe passing the Civil Rights Act was a mistake? Now, again, apparently they don't listen to the show because we do that at least once a week, right? Once a week we talk about why the Civil Rights Act was a mistake. Does Kirk believe that racial segregation should be permitted in the United States? Again, this is how shallow they are. It's as if you don't support the Leviathan and the building of a mass racialized bureaucracy and a refounding of the United States via the Civil Rights Act, you must be pro-racial segregation. Now I'd love to find this guy and ask him, like, hey, when's the Wired magazine article going to be done on black-only dormitories? When's the Wired magazine article going to be on anti-white hiring practices at Johns Hopkins?
Okay, I think it's clear from the last section of this clip that when he says the Civil Rights Act was bad, that it doesn't mean that black people don't deserve equal rights or that racial segregation was good. I believe he's talking about the legislation as a whole may not have been as well written as he would have liked. Let's take a look at a different clip and see if that clarifies things.
They have a right to say that we don't like Turning Point's values, we don't like what they stand for, and they go away. We honor their right to do that. We honor their right to say no, that they don't want to do business with Turning Point USA. We don't go sue them and say, hey, Hyatt, or hey, local hotel, we're angry. We'll go to the court of public opinion, and we'll say we don't like it. Now, if it's a government facility, different aspect. But we understand that when you have liberty, you're going to have certain people wall off their doors to their private business and say, no, no, no. In fact, we just dealt with this. And in fact, this might have actually been a violation of the Civil Rights Act, of which we have kind of taken a Caldwell approach and think that the Civil Rights Act in 1964 was way too broad and largely poorly written. But that's a different topic for a different for a different time.
The next quote is that he believes the Great Replacement theory is a reality.
The Great Replacement of white people is far more sinister than any redistricting project. That is at the core of the Democrat project. At the core. And Jasmine Crockett is just some circus act in that entire operation. But it's deathly serious. You shouldn't take what she says seriously. It's just a joke. What she represents is very serious, which is the continued attempt to eliminate the white population in this country. Mark Wayne Mullen joins us next.
So as you can see, he did say that. What I don't understand, though, is why it's called either a conspiracy or a theory. I may even do a video about this in the future, but politicians have talked openly about this for years. Take this document from the United Nations called Replacement Migration. This was released in the year 2000, and it's a real document still available online. The link will be in the description, just like all the other sources. And also, if we take a look at the Wikipedia page for the Great Replacement Conspiracy Theory, what are the three main elements of this theory? It says mass migration, demographic growth of the migrant population, and a drop in birth rate of the white native European population. I mean, those three things are verifiably happening right now. Many European countries are experiencing unprecedented levels of immigration. The birth rates of the native white population are very low and have been for a few years, and the birth rates of the migrant populations tend to be much higher. So if you just do a simple demographic projection based on the current trends, then given enough time, this will happen. Now, trends like this rarely stay the same for so long that this is guaranteed to happen, but I think it's fair to make that argument that if they do stay the same, then this would happen. And I think it's the same argument that was being made not that many years ago, that the world was way overpopulated, and I think most people agree with that sentiment, at least at the time, because not only was the population of the world quite high, but the population growth rates were also quite high, so based on the projections, it would be even worse. Now, I think those projections didn't actually pan out, because birth rates in the meantime have dropped. But at the time when the argument was being made, that's what the projections showed, so that's what people talked about. Next quote is that hydroxychloroquine cures COVID. Yep, this one is confirmed, he did say that. Although, back in 2020, even CNN was saying that, so I'm not sure if this is that big of a gotcha, but sure. The next quote is vaccine requirements are medical apartheid.
And privacy. And if you have concerns about the vaccine, which, by the way, a lot of people do, including Dr. Malone and Brett Weinstein, you should be able to opt out of the vaccine, especially if you're an 18 or 19 or 20-year-old, where you are the lowest risk cohort in the entire country of dying from the Chinese coronavirus. The stories are mounting of young people that have got the vaccine and then have unusual health events afterwards. At Turning Point USA, we are going to give it everything we have to make sure that students are not going to have to live in a medical apartheid because they don't want to get the vaccine.
Well, it's beyond belief. I mean, this is exactly what they told us right-wingers, once they took over the government in The Handmaid's Tale, were going to do to the country. They would force you to put things in your body that you didn't want. They had full control over your body. You no longer had dominion over your body. What can college students do exactly? Do you think you can force these colleges to pull back from this?
So the first thing is we're going to offer legal help through some legal experts we know to any sort of exemptions that might exist, especially at public universities where there might be religious exemptions. Those are going to be tough, Tucker, because unfortunately we have not seen the type of decisive action that these Republican state legislators should have been taking this spring and early summer to be able to grant exemptions for their students. We're going to put pressure on Republican governors and say you have to make sure the state universities do not mandate these vaccines and create these almost two realities. It's this medical ultimatum. But more than anything else, Tucker, what we are going to do is a massive public relations campaign and make sure students know they are not alone. They don't have to hide in the shadows. All of a sudden, they're concerned that if they get the vaccine, they're going to be treated as if there's something. I said this earlier, and this is a big statement, but it's almost this apartheid-style open-air hostage situation. Like, oh, you can have your freedom back if you get the jab. This is unacceptable. We're going to fight back against it.
That's exactly right.
This one is confirmed also. He did say it. In my opinion, this one is also not that big of a gotcha, because when you introduce a new medicine, no matter what medicine it is, it's understandable that a lot of people will be skeptical about it. Because every medicine that has ever existed comes with its own unique set of benefits and side effects. And sometimes, even though it's rare, some of those side effects end up only being discovered many years later. And those side effects can be very serious. Take, for example, thalidomide. This was a medicine that caused babies to be born with deformations, and it was often prescribed explicitly to pregnant women to help with morning sickness and stuff like that. And the link between the deformations, and this medicine being the cause was only discovered and released to the public many years later. So I think it's completely understandable that if people are already a bit skeptic about a particular medicine, and then the government comes in and starts making it mandatory, people will be even more skeptical and more scared. The next quote might be one of the most famous ones, and it is that gun deaths are acceptable in order to have a Second Amendment.
How's it going, Charlie? I'm Austin. I just had a question related to Second Amendment rights. We saw the shooting that happened recently, and a lot of people are upset. But I'm seeing people argue for the other side that they want to take our Second Amendment rights away. How do we convince them that it's important to have the right to defend ourselves and all that good stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. So I'm a big Second Amendment fan, but I think most politicians are cowards when it comes to defending why we have a Second Amendment. This is why I would not be a good politician, or maybe I would, I don't know, but because I actually speak my mind. The Second Amendment is not about hunting. I love hunting. The Second Amendment is not even about personal defense. That is important. The Second Amendment is there, God forbid, so that you can defend yourself against a tyrannical government.
Come on.
And if that talk scares you, wow, that's radical, Charlie. I don't know about that. Well, then you have not really read any of the literature of our founding fathers. Yep. Number two, you've not read any 20th century history. You're just living in Narnia. By the way, if you were actually living in Narnia, you would be wiser than wherever you're living, because C.S. Lewis was really smart. So I don't know what alternative universe you're living in. You just don't want to face reality that governments tend to get tyrannical, and that if people need an ability to protect themselves and their communities and their families. Now, we must also be real. We must be honest with the population. Having an armed citizenry comes with a price. And that is part of liberty. Driving comes with a price. 50,000 people die on the road every year. That's a price. You get rid of driving, you'd have 50,000 less auto fatalities. But we have decided that the benefit of driving, speed, accessibility, mobility, having products, services, is worth the cost of 50,000 people dying on the road. Wow. So we need to be very clear that you're not going to get gun deaths to zero. It will not happen. Right. You can significantly reduce them through having more fathers in the home, yes, by having more armed guards in front of schools. Yes. We should have an honest and clear reductionist view of gun violence, but we should not have a utopian one. You will never live in a society when you have an armed citizenry and you won't have a single gun death. That is nonsense. It's drivel. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year, so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational. Nobody talks like this. They live in a complete alternate universe. So then how do you reduce? Very simple. People say, oh, Charlie, how do you stop school shootings? I don't know. How did we stop shootings at baseball games? Because we have armed guards outside of baseball games. That's why. How did we stop all the shootings at airports? We have armed guards outside of airports. How do we stop all the shootings at banks? We have armed guards outside of banks. How do we stop all the shootings at gun shows? Notice there's not a lot of mass shootings at gun shows. There's all these guns because everyone's armed. If our money and our sporting events and our airplanes have armed guards, why don't our children?
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so this one is also confirmed. He did say it. But I think he explained his reasoning pretty well, and he did make some good points. The main point being that everything comes with a cost. Even things that are overwhelmingly beneficial come with a cost, like cars, which actually end up killing more people every year than guns do. And whether or not you believe that the cost is worth the benefits, whether it's talking about cars or guns, it's absolutely up for debate. You can and you should discuss that and share your opinion if you disagree with his position. And the other argument that I also think it's extremely important to take into account is that America already has an armed population. There's pretty much no way around that, unless you want to completely repeal the Second Amendment, which I don't see as a realistic possibility in the near future. I don't think the vast majority of Americans would be in favor of that. So unless you want to completely remove all guns from everybody, period, and even if you did do that, you would probably not be able to remove the guns from the criminals, and those are the biggest problems. But in any case, I don't think that's likely. So you have to be realistic that you will never be able to completely remove guns and to completely reduce gun deaths to zero. But what you can do is put measures in place to reduce them as much as possible. The next quote is that women's natural place is under their husband's control. Could not find any sources for that one. I will say though, given his religious beliefs, and given how we've already seen the Taylor Swift clip, he would absolutely say that women should submit to their husbands, but like I said, in my opinion, the submit word in this context, which comes from the Bible, is more an expression about order and hierarchy rather than it is control, in my interpretation. Parents should prevent their daughters from taking birth control.
Now he's saying, get your kids off birth control. And praise God, they shouldn't be on birth control if they're your kids.
No Christian parent should ever allow their daughter on birth control, ever. Period. That is, and if your daughter's on birth control or granddaughter, get them off immediately. Don't believe me? There is literature out there that is suppressed by the pharmaceutical companies that is peer-reviewed about the damage that it does to their ability of hormone production in the future, their ability to have kids, but also the depression, the suicide, the anxiety. And I'm not a leader on this. You know who educated me on this? Alex Clark, who runs Politics at Turning Point USA. So I'll tell you a true story. So we have our Young Women's Leadership Summit. It's the largest gathering of young conservative women of any gathering in the country, over 2,500 young conservative women, right? So Alex Clark gives the beginning speech at the Young Women's Leadership Summit. After 5 minutes, she's talking about how no one should be on birth control. And here I am as a man, like, oh my goodness, I don't know how this is going to be received. Standing ovation. The girls are like, ruined my life. It destroyed me. I hated who I was on this stuff. Ditch the pill.
Yeah, one more confirmed. In my opinion, it's absolutely okay if you don't want to be on the pill. Just like we said previously in another topic, every single medicine that has ever existed has its own set of benefits and downsides. And you're completely within your rights to not want either you or your children to be subject to the downsides of a particular medicine, even if the upsides are generally worth it. You have to make that assessment for yourself and for your family, and you're allowed not to want it for whatever reason. The next quote is that George Floyd had it coming, but the January 6th protesters didn't. No sources for that one, sorry. The next claim is that he encouraged parents to protest mask mandates.
Look, I'm going to be very honest. I'm not a fan of these mask mandates. If you want to wear a mask, that's liberty, that's fine. If you want to wear an Abraham Lincoln hat, you can wear that too. If you want to wear a New York Yankees hat, that's fine. I mean, if you think it's going to help you. Do not force me to wear a mask. It's that simple. I'm not going to do it. I'm not. The only time I comply is on the airlines because I actually need to fly the airlines to be able to do my job and travel the country so I can deliver truth to you and make an income and grow Turning Point USA. So that's the fight I do not fight. But every single time I go into one of these grocery stores, where's your mask? I say, well, first of all, the science around masks is very questionable. Very questionable. In fact, some doctors think that masks actually make you sicker and have you less likely to be able to get oxygen and more likely to infect yourself and less likely to be able to fight the virus and actually more likely to be able to die sooner. A lot of people believe that. I've met many doctors that hold that view. Secondly, we have a huge civil liberty issue here. Why do you have the authority to tell me what I can and cannot do with my body? I thought it was my body, my choice. I thought that was the entire thought process as to why we are wrongly able to terminate 1 million children in the womb every single year. And so I just don't like being told what to do generally by the federal government. I'm not a type of person who plays well when the government comes in and starts to say you must put this on your face.
This one is true as well. As far as I know, the consensus that existed on masks before the pandemic was that masks shouldn't be used and weren't effective for respiratory viruses like this. Even Fauci himself said this in a relatively famous interview.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
You're sure of it? Because people are listening really closely to this.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet, but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is. And often there are unintended consequences. People keep fiddling with the mask and they keep touching their face.
For whatever reason, scientists and politicians changed their mind on that partway through the pandemic. But even now, after the pandemic is over, as far as I'm aware, the studies that have come out on the effectiveness of masks during the pandemic actually didn't see any benefits to it. So I think it's acceptable to question whether that was necessary. And the next quote is that Mamdani winning in New York is a travesty because Muslims did 9/11. And I regret to inform you that this one is indeed true. I think that's a very unfortunate thing to say. I don't think you should have said it. Second to last quote, Muslims only come to America to destabilize Western civilization. No direct quote for this, but here's a video of him discussing the values of Islamist countries with Gad Saad.
Dr. Saad, how should we think about all of this?
Look, Islam, like any ideology, has certain defining tenets, some of which might be perfectly consistent with our values, but many of which, regrettably, are perfectly inconsistent with our values. So take, for example, Sharia law, which is Islamic law. It purports that the severity of a punishment depends on the identity of the perpetrator and of the victim. In that sense, it couldn't be any more antithetical to American jurisprudence, which basically says that Lady Justice has to be blind.
And so what further about Islam do you wish or want Westerners to know about? Do you think that Islam is compatible with Western civilization?
The short answer, no. Of course, millions of Muslims decide to ignore the incongruent elements of their religion. They're practicing cafeteria Islam, right? They're choosing the parts that they agree with, and they're ignoring the parts that they don't agree with. But once Islam becomes, never mind a majority, if it becomes a strong minority, we have 1,400 years of history that tells us what happens to all of the foundational values that we hold dearly in the West, right? I mean, you don't have to, believe me, you could just study history, right? I mean, almost every single one of the 56 countries that I mentioned a few minutes ago started off with having zero Islam. And then you close and open your eyes, suddenly it's 99.9% Islam. How did that happen? In some cases, it takes 5 years for it to happen. In some cases, it takes 500 years to happen. But inshallah, it will always happen. I'll mention one other thing. Many of your viewers may not know this. Since 9/11 alone, Charlie, so that's 24 years, there have been 47,000 plus terror attacks committed by Islamic terrorists in nearly 70 countries. And now there are multiple databases that you can use to prove that this number is correct. 47,000 terror attacks. So that should give you a sense of whether Islam is compatible with the West or not.
So why is it that so many Muslims are moving to Western countries? Is it just economics, or is there something more ideological at play here?
It's both. Of course, many Muslims have no interest in conquering anyone, and they want, as you just said, exactly what you said, which is, I want better economic opportunities for me and my children and so on. But the Muslim Brotherhood and many other Islamic theorists and scholars and politicians have said that we will conquer the West through three means. And I hope that your listeners and viewers take note. Number one, we will conquer the West through the womb of our women, right? So that's a demographic fertility battle. We will produce 5 children, you will produce 1.2 children, and we will outbreed you. Number two, we will conquer the West through hijrah. Hijrah is the Arabic word for immigration, and that's exactly what we do with our open border policies. And number three, we will conquer the West by using your miserable freedoms and liberties against you. They're screaming this out from the top of the mountain, and yet most Westerners choose to ignore it, Charlie. It is so galling. It is so frustrating. I escaped that world 45 plus years ago, and here it is now hunting me down 50 years later.
As you can see from this, I think they are having a pretty balanced conversation about the topic, actually. As they said, the vast majority of Muslims are good people. They are completely fine, and they don't subscribe to the bad parts of the ideology that they are describing. But there are others, unfortunately, that do subscribe to parts of the ideology that are completely antithetical to what we value in the West. There are certain surveys, for example, I believe in the UK, where they asked Muslim immigrants whether they supported the implementation of Sharia law in the UK or not. And in some cities, the approval rating for those Muslims is up to 30%. I think that's a little bit scary. And the last quote is that Palestine doesn't exist, and those who support it are like the KKK. I could not find any sources for this or anything even remotely close. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you again in the next one.
If everything completely goes away, how do you want to be remembered?
I mean, if I die?
Everything just goes away. How would you, if you could be associated with one thing, how would you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered for courage for my faith. That would be the most important thing. The most important thing is my faith in my life.